First off, I wanted to say thank you for purchasing Jeep Wrangler JK 2007 to 2017 Jeep Grower. As you see here, we're going to show you how to install. Now note, before you actually want to apply the vinyl, you have to make sure you clean any and all dirt, grime, oil to ensure that the adhesion between the wrap itself and the grill is best as possible. It's important to be thorough, make sure there's nothing left. Any fragments from the towel as well are liable to impair the adhesion. So long as all oil, grime, dirt is removed, it should be good. I do note that though we have this removed from the vehicle itself, you don't need to. It's just easier to show as we install it. And despite the fact that this grill is already clean, we're still taking precautions to ensure that it's as clean as possible. Now the grill having been cleaned, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the vinyl. And I'm going to go ahead and cut off a strip to the right to adhere to the left, trying to give myself some resistance as I peel. I also note that you can weed the inner pieces, as it may be easier to actually install without them present. In which case I'd go ahead and, as soon as I try and lift an edge here,
Real quick, on the side note, this grill came to us with no emblem on it. But just in case yours does have an emblem, you'll need to remove it before installing the grill wrap. One of the easiest ways to do it is to grab a regular old standard house putty knife, push up against the chrome part of the emblem, not the paint. You don't want to scratch your paint. After you get each piece removed, you'll still have adhesive left on your paint. If you get some wax and grease remover, you can easily remove it just by soaking it down and then scratching it with your fingernail, and use a soft Scott's paper towel and wipe it off. You want to make sure your paper towels are soft and not too abrasive, because then the abrasive paper towel can actually scratch your paint. If you use a Scott's work towel, they're pretty soft, as you can see we're using them too. Right here, he's gently rolling it back and soaking the pieces down. He's not soaking the backing very much. He's just trying to get the wrap to where it's completely saturated so it could actually touch its own adhesive side and not stick to it. If you soak the backing too much, it can actually make the backing stick to the adhesive, so you gotta be careful of that. On another side note, let's talk about the solution that we're using to keep the back of the wrap slick. It's 6 drops of Dawn dishwashing soap added to a quart of water. Shake it up real well, and then you can just spray it on the back of it. It will not adversely affect the adhesive on the back of the wrap. Once you once you squeegee it out, then you'll have no problem with adhesion for years to come. Know that he's taking careful precautions to not overstretch the wrap as he's pulling it off. He's just going back and forth piece by piece, spraying a little bit of the solution on, and then pulling it gently as to not overstretch it. These are not all of our standard tools for installing the wrap. You'll notice that this is done here with a home hair dryer. We're using a credit card and paper towels. That way we can show you how to do this with something that you've already got at your house and you don't have to go out and spend money to buy. Once again, he's going back in and he's soaking the whole thing down very thoroughly. Soaking the grill as well. Notice how where the adhesive wrap touched itself, it did not stick because he soaked it thoroughly. Now he's just gently putting it on, pulling it back and forth, trying to get it to where it's perfectly straight before he starts to squeegee it out. You're not in a big rush here, just take your time. Center it from one side, go back to the other, center it, go back and forth. This stage of the game, you are not in a rush. Notice how he's going back and forth and checking this thoroughly, making sure it's lined up. Because it's not that much fun pulling them back off and realigning them. Not that you can't do that, but that's when you're more than likely going to stretch it. Then you'll have to use the heat gun to shrink it back down. And so as we were saying, it's better just to take your time at that stage before you start squeegeeing it down. Here you notice he grabbed the credit card that was sitting off to the left and took a Scott's towel, wrapped it on there, so not with any corners that are going to be pressed up against it. Corners are off to the side, so it's just a soft, flat, straight edge. And he starts squeegeeing the water out. This is 3M air release wrap vinyl, so you'll have no problem getting those air bubbles and water bubbles out. You just want to make sure you get it out nice and slowly and surely. And then as you'll see, you'll start getting little tiny fingers left in it. Don't worry about those at this time. Just want to make sure you get it all set down nice and good. And don't worry about the fingers yet. We'll show you how to get those out. At this point in time, he has it set pretty well. If you do need to get it off because it's not in the right place, you can do it. You just have to be very careful not to overstretch it. So grab it from the thicker points of the vinyl and not the thinner points. Obviously, he seems to be doing pretty good with this, and it's lined up perfectly. There we go. That's the fingers we were talking about. Don't worry, we always get them. Everybody always gets them. They're easy to get out. That's just part of wrap vinyl. So they look pretty formidable if you don't know what you're doing. But once you do it the first time, you'll be like, easy peasy. So at this point in time, we typically let it sit there for about 15 to 20 minutes. Let some of that water dissipate. And then we can go back with the heat gun and get all those fingers out. As you see, even the professionals get a lot of them. Alright, that's the home style hairdryer. It does not get very hot. You want to get it to where it doesn't burn your hand when you're blowing over it. Not that this one would, but we normally use blow torches and we also use professional heat guns. But for this video, we are using a home style hairdryer. That way you can see exactly how we do it with those tools. He is gently pulling the edge out a little, just to add a little bit more tension. There we go, now we can see it a little bit better. Now as you're heating it, you'll notice when the vinyl starts to get a little jiggly, it loosens up, and it's actually just something that you see. It just, you'll know that point. It'll start shrinking when you pull the heat gun back. That's when you take your finger and you push into the wrinkle. You don't want to go from side to side because that'll actually make your wrinkle fold into a hard wrinkle. You just, on the back side, as you can see, it's dusting the heat back and forth, back and forth. You go with your thumb or your finger on the back side of it and you gently walk the wrinkle out. Not wrinkle, we'll call it a big wave. Finger. And just take your time, go back and forth, side to side. No hurry, no rush. At this point in time, you really don't want to pull it back off because then you will overstretch the vinyl. If that is the case and you have to do it, you can't. You just really got to take your time, heating it up and laying it back down because you'll have to re-shrink the vinyl. Back and forth. You always want to keep it cool enough to where you can touch it. You don't want it so hot that you cannot touch it. But you want it hot enough to where when you do touch it, it definitely feels hot. This is one of the parts that you need to take a little bit more care. And once again, you're not rushing. Just to heat set this thing, you're probably going to be 15 minutes. So you go back and forth, run your fingers out with your hands like you're seeing done here, and then keep going back over the thing. If you have any air that's still trapped in there, when you use heat, it will make the hair expand, and therefore they'll really pop out and you'll be able to see it. At this time, you should be able to run it out because it does have air channels in it. When you heat set it back down, though, it does collapse the air channels. So if by chance you do get a bubble in there that you cannot get out, just use a safety pin, pop it, and depress it out, going from the outer ring in, and then reheat it. If by chance you're wanting to put your emblem back on, you can go down to any paint and body shop, not shop, but any paint and body store, and buy a roll of 3M adhesive tape. And then all you gotta do is you lay the emblems out on one side of the tape, use a razor blade, cut the back side of the tape out, and go back to your vehicle. It's usually easier if it's laying down like it is right here. And you can lay the Jeep emblem out, make sure it's where you want it, then pull the backing tape slowly and set it in place. It won't damage the wrap unless you try and pull it back off. Then he'll probably take the wrap with it. But the wrap, once he's done here, will be adhered. If you want to remove the wrap at a later time, you just do the reverse step with that blow dryer. You get it nice and hot, not so hot that it melts the plastic, but hot enough to where when you put your hand on it, you can tell it's really hot, and then just pull it back off. This vinyl's good for pulling off. They say for 3 years. We have done it longer than that, but 3M says this vinyl is good to pull off 3 years after you've adhered it to it. If you have a subpar paint job, whenever you put graphics on and you pull it back off, it will pull the paint off. This should not with a Jeep factory dual paint job. Notice how he's heated that area up. That's a pretty big finger right there. He's heated it up, gone and worked on other things, came back, heated it again. He'll probably go work on something else, come back to it, heat it again. And then eventually it just keeps getting smaller. So you warm it up, get it nice and hot, then go somewhere else. As it cools down, it shrinks. Come back, you heat it up, go work somewhere else. As it cools down, it keeps shrinking. So it keeps getting smaller and smaller because that was a really big finger that you saw in the pictures. Slowly but surely, he's working it down. He's not in a rush. And you're just slowly going back and through, even though that there's no wrinkles in a lot of these areas, he's heat setting it because wrap vinyl always works better and lasts a lot longer after you get it adhered by getting it hot and pressing it down. And what happens is that adhesion will stick to the paint. The air channels will collapse. You don't want them to collapse too much, but they do collapse and they form a permanent, semi-permanent bond until you get it hot again to pull it back off. If you leave it on over 3 years, once again, 3M does not say it will come off. We have pulled them off after 3 years, but according to 3M, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to change this every 3 years. They do last a lot longer though. There's that big finger again. Still working, going back and forth. After shrinking it 3 or 4 times, it's time to finally set it. Well, that's pretty much it. He's pretty much done. This thing's about ready to just get put back on. Once again, we appreciate you coming by and checking out our videos.